All right, everybody, we are back for part 2 of my Introduction to Wildlife Videography series. These videos are aimed at people who do not know anything about video. You're finding yourself with a modern camera that can shoot video, and you're seeing clips, and you're being bombarded by these reels on Instagram, and you're thinking, how do I make nice video? So I am here to teach you the little bit that I've learned and invite you along on my journey. I don't think this video is for people who are more sophisticated than me, of which I'm sure there are many. This video is for people who probably find themselves 1 or 2 steps behind me. Let me screw up first, and you will learn. What do we need to shoot wildlife video? There are several things. So for one, we're going to talk about modes. So you need a camera that can shoot video. Now, most cameras can. Even some of the DSLRs I had this year have video. But let's figure out what it is. Now, you might have to do some Googling about your camera, but you're looking for a couple different things. So first and foremost, can you shoot 4K? If you can, I would. 4K is going, as you know, television and all that stuff. 4K is going to be the highest resolution that most cameras can shoot. Forget 8K, forget 6K. You don't need to go up to anything like that. That's way overkill at this point. But most of the cameras for people watching these videos are either going to be able to shoot some 4K or some 1080p, or often a mixture of both. You've got a couple of different frame rates. So 24 to 30 frames per second, that's going to be your normal. I'm shooting this at 24 frames per second. That's your normal type of video. Then 60 frames per second, I don't really use for much, but you can slow 60 frames down. The thing you need to think about is if you want to slow anything down, if you want to shoot slow motion, then you need to take more frames so that when you ask the software to slow it, there's not missing information, if that makes any sense. If you take 30 frames per second in a 30 frame per second movie or reel, and you start wanting to slow it down 3-4 times, it's going to get jittery because you don't have enough frames in between what you're doing. So the granddaddy of slow motion, I would say right now, is 120 frames per second. A lot of nice cameras now can shoot 4K 120. That is the standard for me. I would not buy a camera right now that cannot shoot it, just because I love slow motion so much, and 4K is important to me to be able to do that. Not necessary, though. A lot of cameras can do 4K 1080. If that's all your camera does, then shoot it and love it, and you can look at upgrades if and when it makes sense for you. If your camera cannot do 120, then shoot 60 if you want slow motion. You can't slow it down as much typically, but instead of slowing it down 5 times, maybe you can slow it down 2 to 3 times and still be okay. If you can't shoot any of that stuff, 4K 30 is pretty good. That's going to be your normal, shoot something at normal speed, normal movement, not getting too slow. So that's what you're looking for, are your different frames per second, and you're looking to see, so what resolution and what frames per second can you shoot? Now, your golden rule, if you didn't see my last video, which watch it here or here, I don't know, somewhere here, you need to make sure your shutter speed is double your frame rate. So if you're shooting 30 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 60. Your aperture can be whatever you want according to the exposure, and then as with stills, you're going to try to shoot the lowest ISO. Now, usually you're not going to change your ISO, because what's normally going to happen is that you're quickly going to run into a position, because your shutter speed is so low, the light will start getting overwhelming. So a lot of times you'll just tighten up your aperture. If you're shooting super low light, super early, super late inside a forest, maybe you raise your ISO. And if you can't tighten up your aperture anymore, and you're trying to shoot like noon in the middle of the day, then you need to put a filter on the front of the lens. You cannot change your shutter speed. I know people are going to say, oh, there's times for artistic reasons, sure. But for beginners, do not change your shutter speed. Your shutter speed should always be twice what you're shooting. Now, your next thing is going to be which camera profile to use. So are you going to use something called log, which is kind of the equivalent of raw on stills? Some cameras, like professional cine cameras, can literally shoot raw video, but it's a big workhorse of a file, huge file sizes. You're probably going to have a hard time editing unless you have a custom-built machine for that kind of stuff. So log is less intensive. You don't have the full level of control. Like I can't go in, I'm shooting in log right now. I can't go in and change white balance and things like that later, but it does give me a nice flat, ungraded profile. Whereas if you're shooting like the JPEG equivalent, then your camera is going to be putting some color science on things. Now, it depends on your camera. I'm shooting Fuji, and there's actually a few film profiles in here I actually really do like, and I've shot them. But you got to watch because you can't change a lot of that stuff later. So if you shoot it, especially in video, remember in stills, you're taking one image of one frame. In video, you might be coming across. So you might be shooting sun, shade, bright green foliage. So I think the more flexibility in editing that you have, the better, because different parts of your clip might need different things. So if you can shoot log, I would. When you first look at it, you're going to look at it and say, ugh, it looks kind of flat. It's very easy to fix this. My next video is going to have a walkthrough through the free editing software, DaVinci Resolve, which I think is fantastic, and everyone should use it if you're new. And it's a couple of clicks and you're going to be able to convert your camera into a normal color, but give yourself some more room. So that's what log means. Log footage is just flat footage that hasn't had anything done to it, gives you more dynamic range. In this case, for example, it's going to be easier to like bring up some of the darks in my room while not overexposing the outside light. That's where log will have a big benefit. Now, you're also going to get into compression. So this is your last thing. So should you be shooting something called long GOP or long GOP or all I, all intra? I'm not an expert in video, but from my understanding, long GOP is going to essentially try to take like the beginning and end frame and then fill in the middle with software guessing, something to that line. From what I've read, I haven't done much experimenting, but from what I've read, long GOP would make sense for stuff like this right now. You know, you're shooting long footage, you want to get higher record time. In hindsight, if I could go back, I'd probably do that because I'm going to fill my memory card with these 2 talking head videos, and there's not much going on. So one thing long GOP is doing, right, is my couch is stationary, my plant is stationary, none of that stuff's moving. So the camera is not trying to re-render every pixel in every frame. The difference is all intra, where it is every frame. It's, again, my understanding, maybe I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, is it's rendering the entire image every frame. So as you can imagine, it's a lot more information to work with, and you're going to get a much bigger file. Now, again, from what I've learned, I hear that all intra files are apparently easier to edit. Apparently long GOP files can mess up some computers and bog you down and be harder. So I'm not sure how that works, but I think that's, for me, one of the reasons why I've stayed away from them. All I files edit really well on my computer. They seem to have no issue. So then, and I might have messed up my names, but the other thing you're going to get into, I think when I said log versus camera profiles, those are your camera profiles. It's not compression. So the other thing you're going to need to look at are different types of codecs. So H.265, H.264, those are kind of your big ones. I would research your computer and your camera and just see what you have. I'm shooting H.265. It's supposed to give you a lot of editing range, and in this day and age, it seems to be pretty decent to edit with. But it all depends on what you can edit and what your computer can handle. Here's another thing, too. If your computer can't handle editing 4K and you don't have the money to buy a new computer, or you're not interested in upgrading that right now, then just shoot 1080. It's going to be a lot easier. Or shoot 4K and then you can make something called a proxy file. So when you're editing, it'll scale everything down, make it a little bit easier for your computer to handle, and then it'll still export the full version. So okay, so that's the basic rules of what you need to do inside your camera. Setting things up. Again, if you have questions, put it in the comments, and either me or someone else here will be able to help you with it. But that's the basic idea of what you're setting. If you're just going out and you want to shoot your first video, I would probably go 30 frames per second, 60 shutter speed, in log profile with all I 265 compression. That's what I shoot a lot. That's like a good quality, everything looks good, should be easy enough to work with. That's where I would start. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's what I'm doing. So if you're 2 steps behind me, that's the step I'm on until I learn otherwise. Now let's get into some stuff I have some idea about. Tripod for sure. Tripod. Especially if you're a beginner, you know, we're probably not using huge, massive, crazy professional gear, and you're doing this on your own. So get some sort of tripod, and if you can, lock it down, because one of the biggest things you're going to have, whether you're on a gimbal or a ball head, even if you're on a tripod, if you're still wiggling around, it's going to look bad. So lock down your shot and keep it tight, keep it crisp. I will do a review in the future. I just bought a new fluid head, which I think I never thought I would spend some actual money on a tripod, but the iFootage K7 tripod head is really nice. It's very smooth and beefy, so it handles my lens and body well, and it really dampens all the movement. So if I'm trying to track let's say it's a chipmunk or a raccoon walking across a trail or something, I can track the movement a lot smoother. But when you're first starting out, do still shots. Just lock down the camera like I have right now. My camera's on a tripod pointed straight at me, so you're not being distracted by the room. You're just getting me. So tripods are great. If you're buying a tripod, again, I'm happy to provide some advice, but one thing I would say is you want a tripod that's flexible. It should be stable enough to take your gear, but you also want it light enough that you can carry it around with you, and ideally something that can get low. One thing that I've had a lot of fun with is the iFootage monopod. I use it a lot just for support when I'm out walking, make sure my knee doesn't tweak on me, but it has a foot on the bottom, so I can pop off the monopod, and now I'm left with a little tripod. And I use that all the time. I've been using it lately for shorebirds, for video and stills, and it's fantastic. Now, the head, I try not to do a lot of movement because, again, it is on a ball head. So if I do, I tighten it up and I really brace with my elbows on the ground and try to keep it smooth. But just having that support to keep the camera locked down is a big deal. So you got to use a tripod. It'll make a big difference for you. What lens should you use for video? In the last one, I said, you can get away with shorter ranges, shorter reach, depending on what you're trying to shoot. I definitely believe that. Whatever lens you're using for wildlife right now, I think is fine. If you're new to wildlife or you're just getting into it, I do think a 200 to 300 millimeter lens can do a lot for you in video that it might not do in stills. In stills, if especially you're trying to take pictures of small birds, it's probably not enough reach to fill the frame. But in video, you're often trying not to fill the frame. You're often trying to set a frame. You don't want... Where are we? You don't want this necessarily all the time, right? Oh, I just kicked my tripod. I'm sorry. You don't need this, right? That's gotta be scary. You probably want to be able to see some motion and see where is he gonna go or what's gonna happen. So if you want motion and you want to tell a story, you got to have some space. This is getting weird, but that's okay. So we've got the space, we've got the shorter range, that's all good. Type of shots. So here's the thing, when you're locking down, think about the shots that you want and try not to chase. So a lot of new video people, when you're out there, you're like really focused on tracking the subject. Tracking shots are often boring, it's often not what you're looking for, it doesn't tell a story, and it's hard to pull off because it's choppy. So instead, do a lot of like lock down, film it, stop, lock down, film it, stop. Now here's the thing, is once you learn how to edit those clips together, you're going to learn how to put them together and tell a narrative, whereas when you're first starting out, you might feel a little scattered, thinking, well, I need more from this clip. I need a 60-second image where I track the owl across the sky. It's not going to be that easy. So instead, get different shots. My favorite shot is I get the animal and then it does its thing and it eats and then it walks out of scene. I love stuff when the animal walks out of scene, and then that's my natural cut to the next clip. The next clip might be again of the animal doing something, and then again he'll walk out of scene. Now, you're not going to just want to keep putting those same types of clips over and over together, but if, for example, let's say you think he's going to come into scene, so you say, oh, I think that bird's going to land on the flower. Well, focus on the flower. Use manual focus. That's another tip from the last video. You're almost always going to use manual focus, especially when you're starting. Focus on the flower. Now the bird flies in, eats something from the flower, or let's say a honeybee, and then the bee takes off and leaves. Beautiful little clip. That's a nice one. Friend of mine was shooting the other day, and he was shooting a flower, shooting a bee, and a hummingbird came in and went for the flower and then left. So I'll see if I can get him to send me that clip, because holy smokes, I'm jealous. It blew my mind. And I think that's a good one where a still would be tough, because even if you had the still with the hummingbird, it'd be cool, but I don't know that it would convey the emotion of watching the bee. If you saw the still of the hummingbird, you'd think you're looking at a picture of a hummingbird that happened to have a bee in it. If you see the video, you're just watching this little bee do his thing, peaceful bee, happy bee, and then, whoa, a hummingbird comes in, does his thing, and then leaves. So it tells the story a lot better. So you want to think about the types of shots you're doing. And then the last thing, as I hinted on, is editing. So you need an editor to put it all together. I highly, highly recommend DaVinci Resolve, and I will link here. Casey Ferris is a godsend on DaVinci Resolve. He's an amazing teacher, and he does so much work to put so much stuff out there for free. I believe he often also sells some courses. And I've bought a few things, some motion graphics. So if you see like a cool title, this probably came from Casey. Now he's got videos where he'll even teach you how to build that from the ground up, but that's overkill. That's a lot to learn so far. So I'm going to have him linked up at the top here to his crash course. But here's the thing, DaVinci Resolve is professional grade software that they're using it to make movies and everything, and they have a paid version and a free version. The free version is amazing. I still have not found a need to upgrade to the paid version. Even once you do, it's cheaper than a year of an Adobe subscription, and it's an outright license. So no subscriptions. You buy it when you need it and you have it. But their free version is really amazing, and there's a ton of stuff on YouTube. But I have to shout out Casey. I've been watching him since day one, and anytime I need something, I just Google it, and sure enough, he's got a video that showed you how to do it. So I'm going to make a video, probably 30 to 40 minutes, about how to use DaVinci Resolve for wildlife specifically, what I think a wildlife shooter needs to know how to do. But his videos are awesome, and they're going to save you some time. So if you're interested and you're into this, go out and try a shot. Download DaVinci Resolve, and I'll have something up for you this week teaching you how to use it. But take what I said. You're going to get your modes, go back and figure out what mode you want to shoot in. You're going to find your subject, and you're going to think about what the shot's going to look like. You're going to use a tripod. You're going to lock everything down, and you're just going to get a couple nice shots. And that's all you need. Start with something simple, something cool. If you can shoot slow motion, wait till you see a slow motion target in your backyard. I remember the first time my favorite bird, chickadees. No matter what I see, I love my chickadees. And I kind of took them for granted. But the first time I filmed my feeder in slow motion and saw 2 chickadees come in and land, and they squabbled and chirped at each other and then fought for seeds and one left, it was just such a cool clip. If I have it, I will post it. I don't know my storage. I'm working on my storage and file management. But these are the strips you need, and I think if you can put all this stuff together, we're going to be in it. I'll show you how to edit tomorrow, and then we'll be done. The trifecta of basics. We'll all be on the same page about putting this together, and then we can start working on more and more things. I'm personally going down the documentary route. That's what I'm really passionate about, and I'm learning how to create there. Here's my first one about the green heron in my local marsh, if you haven't seen that. But failing that, we're going to be on this journey together and see what we get. And for anyone still here, again, the Viltrox 13mm 1.4 is what I'm vlogging on from now on. I'm in crop mode at 18mm for a tighter field of view, and yeah, I think it's good. No focus breathing like the old XC. So this camera does a great job. If you see it failing, it's probably me. If I think the camera's having an issue, I will be honest and tell you about it. But as I've said from day one, in summary, I am going to show you my hits and misses all the time. So my last video, on vlogging test, I was really happy with the dynamic range out of the camera. I like the field of view of the lens. I like the sharpness of the lens. But yeah, in hindsight, there were some things in the video that, a lot more things in the video that didn't work than did, but I still wanted to post it. I want you to see, where I go wrong, so that when I get it right, you can trust that I'm learning and figuring things out, and I'm giving you the best advice. So best advice I can give you. There's probably way better advice, but if you're here, then I'm going to try to teach you something. So thanks, guys, and we'll talk soon.